And welcome back to Cape Town Fashion Council's COVID Reboot series, the webinar that is there to educate, inspire, empower you as the fashion economy or sector in South Africa to do better. Now, I'm your host, Colin Donsko. I'm the kid from Spice TV, and I'll be facilitating you over the next few weeks as Cape Town Fashion Council continues to be a pioneer in leading the fashion economy forward through development, through growth, through evolution, and more importantly in the series, through bringing you key individuals in the industry, the pioneers, the leading voices, the experts, or those who know the tricks of the trade, and we're presenting them to you via this platform to inspire and help you transition out of the series. Now, don't forget, over the next few weeks, Cape Town Fashion Council's got a host of exciting initiatives and projects. And if you hop on over to the website at www.ctfc.co.za, you'll find all of that information there. It's exciting times ahead, and Cape Town Fashion Council continues to be there for South Africa's fashion economy. Now, on this episode, we're zooming in on the future of fashion business. On today's COVID Reboot webinar series, we're very privileged to have none other than Michael Lawrence, the Executive Director of National Clothing Retail Federation. Michael, good afternoon and welcome.
Hello, Colin. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat to us. Michael, again, Cape Town Fashion Council prides itself on being able to present or bring people like yourself onto these platforms to speak to the local fashion economy. But Michael, let's zoom in. COVID-19 has shaken or turned the fashion industry or sector upside down. But let's, for a second, think out of that box. What are some of the developments and what are some of the opportunities that a period like this presents to the fashion economy before we zoom in on the work you're doing?
Well, look, it's even before COVID-19, we saw some functional changes happening in some of those markets in the East that have been such a dominant factor in our value chain over the last 2 decades in particular. Mm-hmm. We've seen significant changes in exchange rate. We've seen changes in thinking. We are seeing a greater emergence of e-commerce, and I don't just mean online shopping. I mean, it's now possible to be a designer and sit in basically anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. You can sit in Cape Town and be designing for a clothing factory in Bangladesh, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And the reverse is equally true. We can have designers from all over the world who contribute to what should be happening in our manufacturing spaces right here in South Africa. Mm-hmm. So there have already been a number of changes taking place. We'd identified already with government some fairly ambitious goals to start re-looking at the way we do business inside of this value chain for all players in the value chain. I work with the bigger retailers. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But for all players, which would include the whole design community, significant parts of both fabric and finished goods manufacturing. So everything was already changing before COVID-19. What has COVID-19 done specifically for us as a result of just the way in which it's being handled? Well, it's helped us to recognize even more how we need to be engaging with each other more productively on a more remote basis. I mean, it's crazy.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned all those key points, because I want us to zoom in on the challenges, but also the opportunities and the developments and the new fashion ecosystem. I want us to zoom in on all of those different elements. But quickly, Michael, the National Clothing Retail Federation, at its core, what is its objective?
So it's a pretty boring organization, I have to admit. It looks after trade and economic issues for the clothing retailers who choose to belong to it. Mm-hmm. And those who choose to belong are pretty much some of the big retail names. And there are some fundamental non-competitive trade and economic issues that do need to be engaged both with government and within the value chain and with organized labor and outside of the country. And we've got to look at things like how is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the Free Trade Agreement going to play out for us, and what are the opportunities and challenges there, and what were they going to be? I mean, even up to in fact, in March, I was supposed to be speaking at a trade conference in Addis, and that got cancelled. So yeah, there's quite a lot that needs to be looked at on a collective basis.
Absolutely.
And pretty much anyone who wants to join us can join us typically as a retailer.
And I think it's important that we have organizations like the National Clothing Retail Federation just to help navigate into the future. We want to zoom in on the future of fashion business. Michael, quickly talk me through old systems that will no longer work. What needs to change in order for us to move forward?
Well, firstly, it is important that we understand where the big challenges are internationally for us. The big challenges come from organizations that work to significant scale. Now, scale operates on is basically driven by one of two opportunities that we see internationally. To the west, and I'm including Europe obviously here, more predominantly, we see that scale comes because large businesses such as Zara and H&M have very carefully crafted their vertical integration on their value chain. It's almost the case that they own the cotton fields on which the cotton grows even before it gets processed to the point where it reaches a product in the store. They really own sources of raw material way down deep, and they can. And what they are able to then do is eliminate the inefficiencies at various points in the supply chain. And the moment you take out inefficiencies, your cost structures become much simpler, and your cost to customer becomes much better and more competitive by the time it reaches the shelf. In the East, it's very, very different. So what they do to operate to scale is they typically have government management that intervenes. I was going to say interferes, but it's not an interference because it's constructive. That intervenes in those critical nodal points along the value chain to ensure that there are efficiencies. And again, it's the same rule. The more of the efficiencies you take out, the better it is for everyone. The peculiar thing about those vertical integration, large to scale models, is there's a lot of opportunity for smaller entrepreneurs to hook in on all of that efficiency, because suddenly there is resource to offer to those who are good entrepreneurs, who are good creatives, who are good at adding, who are understanding where to add value and how to add value, those who are good at identifying not just a gap in the market, but can see true market in the gap. I'm going to come back to that also later. But it's that, and we've had too much of an instance here where we don't have operation to scale, and we don't have proper opportunities for people to develop constructive markets, and it's such a competitive environment at every nodal point that we push up the price. We create inefficiencies at the linkage points along the value chain, and we push up the price in a ridiculous way. Absolutely. And then what we end up with coming to the consumer is unaffordable for the value chain that we're participating in locally. And we've seen changes happen to that, but that's going to need to happen more and more going forward.
Absolutely. Where are those changes coming from, though? Who's enforcing those changes? We know that that's one of the biggest problems around costing and selling too high, and that in essence affects the future, the success of the business. So whose responsibility is it to change those factors?
Well, the responsibility happens to rest with all of us. Yes. To drive the changes.
Yeah.
But what we've seen, and we can talk a little bit about there's been developed now over some 2 years, and when we talk about the master plan, I want to talk a little bit even before the 2 years. But over the last 2 years, we've developed this national master plan. It's actually the second completed master plan nationally. The first was for the motorcar people, and we all know the motorcar people have, no pun intended, but they have drivers and operators there that function very differently, including their international linkages. We as a national linkage, we're the first national linkage master plan in our clothing and textile master plan, retail clothing and textile, footwear and leather. And that's just come about because everyone takes collective responsibility. Now, yes, retail as is currently shown, makes the most money out of the value chain right now. So it is important that retail participate in a leadership role, but it may not participate as in a dominant role that prejudices the rest of the master plan. And so we've got a structure which gives all of the other value chain players opportunity to participate.
Wow. Well, let's zoom in on or let's speak directly to the SME sector. So to small to medium enterprises who's obviously in the market and they're currently trading. What you mentioned earlier that they should be looking at opportunities or developments taking place or currently that has come as a result of what we're currently experiencing with the rapid changes and everyone's forcing or being forced to change. What are some of the opportunities that these SMEs should be looking out for? Again, we don't want to focus or highlight the challenges too much and forget that there are opportunities. So where should they be? I mean, they need access to market. They need to identify gaps in the market now with the new fashion economy. And everything's transformed into the digital space. So what is it that they should be looking out for?
So let's just touch on, I'm going to touch on two major things, and I'll touch on retail's role and responsibility first. So we've been working very closely with heads of supply chain of a number of retailers, not just members of the NCRF, really a large group of what are technically medium-sized and then to the big retailers in South Africa. They're big, and for the SMME, that's a very big space, and all of them, without exception, have indicated that they're going to be driving opportunities for integrating SMMEs into what they do and where they do and how they're doing it. Now that's not a light switch opportunity. That has to be carefully managed. It's got to be profitably managed. It's got to be efficiently managed. And we've identified a couple of real hard elements that can make that happen. So one of them is in terms of training and retraining, repurposing and rethinking around SMMEs. In our CETA system, we as retail, because we're such a big economic operator, we employ so many people, we plow as clothing retail an immense amount of money into the CETA system. The wholesale and retail CETA is a really well-funded CETA because of all of retail, not just clothing retail. We've said to the Minister of Trade and Industry and the team, they go talk to the Department of Higher Education and persuade them that the CETA money that's come from ourselves as retail, not just come back to retail training, but that it actually go into value chain training. Now there are all kinds of things that can happen there. This is not just about training interns now. This is about getting our entrepreneurs, our SMMEs, to identify where's the real training intervention space that they need in order to make their businesses work better. Because we all need to do better. We all have to become better. Every day is about finding a way to end the day knowing you've done better. So there's a real hardcore opportunity, and that cooperation has been quickly leveraged, and we probably would have been in the middle of some very dynamic conversations now if it wasn't that government has been a little bit distracted by the issues around the national disaster. But another opportunity, Colin, is we all know that it's incredibly difficult to find local fabric at value and at volume for local finished goods manufacturing. We've identified that. We said that to the Minister of Trade and Industry, and we said to him, look, as retail, what we're willing to do with the fabric manufacturers is we will guarantee on a ring-fence basis for a significant period of time that we will not reduce our volume/value uptake from the existing manufacturers, the fabric manufacturers. We'll look after them in terms of their current modality. But then we want the duty, that 20% duty on fabric to be removed. And where does that opportunity present to? We guaranteeing it as retail. We guarantee the existing, but the value of the tariff being reduced, that must go to the creative sector, the manufacturing sector in our space. So it's not just a talk shop that we put together. This is about where's the real money, where's the real value, where can we really put opportunity in people's way, value in people's way, money in people's way, and in this case even some fabric in people's way to make what needs to be done happen even better. It's taking out the inefficiencies in the value chain.
I love that. And thank you for mentioning that. I mean, that's why we were determined to get you onto one of these episodes, because the Cape Town Fashion Council currently is also saying we need to make real change. We need to really, identify the challenges and then work around or develop strategies based on those challenges, and not just things for the sake of things. And so I can now understand why we did not give up until we got an okay from you to join this episode. I want to talk about what we're seeing currently, Michael, is a lot of brands or businesses, SMEs, are either closing shop or they are lost. I mean, it's been a very devastating experience for them, and we are seeing a lot of businesses close down. But to those who are fireproof, or to those who are able to identify the challenges and then put a plan into place, how do they stay afloat now? I mean, everybody's transitioning, everybody's trying to restructure and shift and rethink business models, etc. But how do they stay afloat at this point?
So it's I can't give advice to individual businesses. I mean, that's just I don't know each business and the specifics of each business. But you used the word earlier. What is our ecosystem? I like that word. What exactly are we looking at to have give us some kind of opportunity for survival? Mm-hmm. The master plan has taught us we need we need the space and place to be speaking to each other. Mm-hmm. So how do we develop collective understanding, collective voices? Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the Cape Town Fashion Council. It's important that platforms such as this be given the opportunity to gather the right kind of data, to be processing the right kind of analytics, and then to be feeding the right kind of analytic outcomes to people who matter. So that's a critical part of it. Who we are in partnership with, who we are choosing to associate with. I've seen many people say, no, I can go it alone, I can go it alone, I can go it alone. And I mean, everyone who goes it alone and succeeds screams their success from the rooftops. Absolutely. The problem is the guys who fail, the 99.999% who fail because going it alone actually is not the best model to use. Those guys, their voices never get heard. So we all want to watch the guy who's won the lottery, but we forget that most people actually lose their money on a lottery type system. It's about smart collaborations, and it's about smart networks. And you guys at Cape Town Fashion Council have provided one platform for that. We are increasingly going to be providing and empowering the existing platforms, and if necessary, providing new platforms for that collectivization, those common voice opportunities.
Oh, I love that. I think in every conversation we're having, two words continuously come up, and that is collaboration and joining or developing or forming networks. I think there's power in that. So thank you for pointing that out again, Michael. Let's talk about future-proofing. I think we're navigating our way into the future. We're zooming in on the future of fashion business in South Africa. How does one... SMEs, let's zoom in quickly on future-proofing. What are the steps that they should be taking? What are the immediate steps that they should take?
Well, I think one of the things many of us have learned right now is that if you're flying by the seat of your pants, it's very easy for your pants to come off and then you're exposed for all to see. And basically you just have to then kind of go and hide in a corner. There need to be reserves in what you do. And I know. I mean, let's call the spade what it is. I know that retail can push and push and push within its value chain for everyone to come as close as damn it to just being the side of survival. It's the fact of the way business gets done by and large, but again, it's also a little bit of a historical way of how we do business. We all want to maximize the profitability of every opportunity, without necessarily seeing how important it is to keep everyone in a state of functionality that allows them to ride out challenges. Because now everyone's fighting about who's supposed to carry the most pain in this. Who's supposed to who's supposed to bear us through this process. So future proofing is you must insist on for yourself and for your own sanity and for the people you do business with on the fact that you are not a fly by the street and by consequence a fly-by-night operation. You're there for the long haul. You're in it to invest in yourself. You're in it to invest in the value that you add to your client, and you must understand it. And you need to find ways of communicating that in your own systems and to the entities you're doing business with. Easier said than done, and it would be really great if I were sitting in a room with some, in a kind of workshop with just a few people who said to me, and for my business, Michael, what does that mean? But it means different things for different people's businesses, and you've got to give substance to that. For some people, it's about making sure it's not a financial survival. For others, it may be, as I say, it's the nature of the relationship with your client, whether you're a designer working with a manufacturer who is working with other manufacturers, a lead manufacturer or designer working with retail. You've got to make sure that those relationships are strong and work out what that strength means.
Thank you, Michael. Some really great advice, and I think what is important is that we bring this home and we make this real to different players in the economy or in the fashion industry. Let's zoom in on the new master plan. If we can touch on the key elements and the key points of the new master plan that you're launching or rolling out.
Well, I said to you I want to go back before the 2 years when it took us about 2 years to do this. Yeah. But I want to go back before that because I need to give credit to organized labor, SACTU in particular, New Law, the guys who look after the leather sector. I need to give credit to organized manufacturing. And I very especially need to give credit, I think, to government for the dynamic and the dynamism that's become part of the process. But that period before 2 years ago needed us all to get used to each other, trust each other, and then get on with the business of looking to actually turn this thing on its head and turning it into something we could be proud of and that would add value. So there are huge levels of accountability that it comes with. So the stats tell us at the moment that less than 30% of what is sold off the shelves of clothing retailers is made in South Africa. Less than 30%.
Oh wow!
But I need to say of the retailers that are part of my group, that let's just say for round figures, 30%, that is in fact South African. We put on our shelves about 90% of what is made in South Africa.
Locally, okay.
So we are huge supporters of the local manufacturing sector. It's not enough. It simply is not enough. Our big support only translates into a total of 30%.
30%.
Most of the medium size retailers and small retailers, you walk into any small retailer, if they've got 5% of South African product on their shelves, it's a miracle. One, it's because they can't get it because all the good stuff ends up with the big retailers anyway. We unashamedly are proud of the quality of the product that we put on our shelves, and there's some good local manufacturers. But now, where do we want to go, Colin? We want to go from just under 30% to 2030 being a number that is close to 65%. That's hell of ambitious. That's incredibly ambitious. Okay, and we make no apology for that because every garment that is sold of ourselves that is not made in South Africa represents jobs in other countries.
Absolutely.
Jobs which could be here. We don't begrudge anyone else their jobs. We just unashamedly want to develop more jobs in this country.
In the country.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that as an ambition.
Yeah.
manufacturing, the whole value chain is very different. It's a lot more technological. It requires a very different set of skills. There was a time up to even 10 years ago when the guys and girls who looked after our machines walked around with screwdrivers in their hand. Now they have to walk around with a tablet. They've got to be computer savvy because the machinery they work with typically can be actually fixed from source, whether the machine was made in Germany or Japan. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the locally produced machines here at the moment that can meet those needs. But the kind of world-class technologies that are real and that we need to compete with require a kind of fourth industrial revolution reality that is already part of the way we are doing business and the way we will continue to do business and the way we will grow this business. Ask me some questions. Ask me something. Tell me where to go about this.
I love that, Michael. Let's bring this home and in layman's terms, what needs to happen and who needs to act in order to get to, there's been a lot of talk around support local fashion, support local manufacturing, but you and I both know that on a strategic level, key players need to make some changes. So what needs to happen what needs to happen and who needs to happen in order for you to achieve that 60% local manufacturing and production target?
Okay, so when you ask a layman, someone just off the street, about our value chain, and believe me, I at one stage in my life, because I have a checkered career, and at one stage I just used to be a mathematics teacher, Colin. I knew nothing about shirt production, and I just thought the only thing about a clothing value chain was people made shirts. Those of us who are currently in the value chain know it's a very, very, very complex value chain. It's so complex. Absolutely. I'm going to get slightly technical again from a trade point of view, that in our trade tariff book, 13%, almost 13% of our trade tariff book speaks to clothing and textile products. That's an impressive chunk. We're a significant contributor to GDP. Even with our smallish manufacturing sector, we're a significant contributor to GDP. But what does that complexity mean? It means that when we look at what we want to do to change from under 30% to over 65%, we've got to be smart about where we're targeting our interventions. There was a time when we could, because we were a closed economy, because we were a protected economy, because the world was not a place of global economy, there was a time when virtually, when I was a kid, now I'm going to show my age, everything I wore, from the laces on my shoes to the shoes themselves, to the underwear of the clothing, was made in South Africa. We cannot do that and be competitive. We cannot have everything made in South Africa.
Absolutely.
There are some countries that are simply going to make better. There are some production centers that are simply going to outsmart us. There are some producers for certain market segments that we're not going to be able to do better than. And if we try and be the best in absolutely everything, we will fail at absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
So where's our challenge? Our challenge is to identify what it is, where it is we want to play, what it is we want to play in, which particular elements of the value chain we want to focus on. It's about smart focus. And here's where we need to be looking. If it's going to be demand side driven, as it should be, then retail is critical in this. Retail helps us understand where our demand side is. We must support our retailers, and I know I represent retailers, so I may be a little prejudiced, biased, and that's okay. We must support our retailers as they position across Africa. Why? Because as they position across Africa, that's where the new demand markets are going to be coming from, and that's where our productive sector will be able to feed into. So it's going to be smart analytics. It's not just about making in ourselves, for ourselves. It's making locally for export production opportunity, to go to markets that are going to be elsewhere, either for our retailers that are expanding the new wave of retail that is going to be servicing across Africa.
Zoom in on the new wave of retail. When you talk about the new wave of retail, what should we expect?
Well, I mean, look, there are two elements to it. One is what is online, and,
Yes.
I stay away from the e-commerce terminology. E-commerce is a just warn everyone, because e-commerce is I can provide architectural services anywhere in the world, engineering services anywhere in the world, legal advice services anywhere in the world, and be sitting anywhere in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I can have the qualifications, the legal qualifications necessary to provide a legal service in New York, but actually have the physical positioning of being it does. So and those are all e-commerce, and there's a whole technical layer of duties and taxes and all kinds of things that are there. Let's just park that to the side. Online shopping. Where is that going? Well, that's a huge dynamic going into the future. We've seen the rollout of the cell phone across Africa as being unexpected to everyone, including the cell phone companies. We are going to see a rollout of smartphone technologies and all of the processes that run with those technologies as being significant. The fact that you and I are having this conversation in this way, and that it is going to be heard by other people right now, speaks to the whole future of blended retail. So there will be physical store presence, because fashion and the outputs of fashion are still physical products. But the way in which we engage, the way in which we market, the way in which we are able to understand better what is where, what is fashionable, what is appropriate for you as an individual, what is sustainable shopping, what is sustainable from a production point of view, where our cotton comes from, where our synthetics come from. Those are things that are going to be on an interactive basis that is very different to the way we shopped before, the way we made decisions before, and the way Africa is going to be making decisions into the future in particular. There's no reason we can't expand our opportunities for markets even elsewhere in the world. That's difficult, but there's no reason why we can't be doing that. But certainly huge opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, and particularly in the SADC region right now. There are already trade agreements that can be leveraged right now in that space. So huge, very, very different places to look at, very, very different spaces playing in. And when we talk about local production in that context, Colin, we must remember that if we're going to be selling product as we do already in the likes of Namibia and Botswana, through even into Mozambique, then we have a responsibility to the local productive capacity that exists even in those countries. And so it's going to be very blended, very integrated, very much about the regional value chains rather than national value chains. And you know, we may find ourselves having we already have significant production which emerged in the Cape, in KZN, and to a smaller degree production hubs in the Gauteng region.
Wow. We're
going to stop thinking about national production hubs and start thinking about regional production hubs. What significantly needs to happen in Swaziland to service, because Swaziland can service to the north of itself instead of sending all its productive capacity to us. What can feed into Swaziland as pre-production to what they're doing going forward? So it's the guys who are thinking through these processes are dreaming in worlds that are very different to what used to be our thinking 10 years ago. And that's where our SMMEs need to be positioning themselves.
Absolutely. I love, I think we speak to the SMME market when we talk about production hubs being decentralized or regional, and I think that also contributes towards the creation of more jobs in those different regions. Also, thank you for touching on the blended retail, as opposed to, I think a lot of pressure is being put on SME owners with the evolution of the digital space, or the rapid evolution of the digital space, and I think many have been feeling the pressure and not understanding how to migrate. I want to zoom in on one thing quickly before we the evolution of the new ecosystem, or the new fashion ecosystem in South Africa. What are some of the developments there, and how will this change the way retail is done in the continent or in the country?
Well, don't you want to ask me some questions on world peace instead? Because that's a complicated question. Look, essentially fashion is a peculiar relationship that is fundamentally driven by a consumer, by demand side. Now, yes, sorry, Colin, I'm not always hearing you, but yes, we do shape the consumers' demand. Those of us those in production, those in retail. It's part of why we have fashion shows. It's part of why we put on displays of clothing. It's part of why we use the services of influencers. Mm-hmm. It is to drive a shaping of the demand side.
Absolutely.
But don't ever underestimate the extent to which the consumer shapes and gives clear direction from a demand side to what ought to be produced. The power of the consumer is incredible in all of the elements of developmental elements of the fashion value chain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And increasingly now, as the space of social media, it's amazing. Big data analytics has become an absolutely fascinating experience for me. There are peculiar linkages that you can make when you analyze data, and I'm going to be slightly frivolous but also slightly serious in this. Mm-hmm. It is almost possible for me to understand how well you manage your money based on the color of the sock that you buy. Now I can do that analytic if I have enough data with enough socks and enough money management information. And then you can draw the most peculiar linkages sometimes in the most obscure ways. Now, I gave you a significant obscure linkage deliberately because there are specific linkages that might at first glance look obscure but more useful. And again, this is something SMEs and small business owners, small to medium business owners must start thinking through themselves. Where do they go to find out what analytics are being run, how they can contribute to the data collected, and how they can benefit from the data collected. And here, I'll give you a very simple, basic instance of this. When people wanted to work out whether you are good at managing your credit, we now have very sophisticated credit bureau data collection activities that gather information from the way you use your cell phone technology, the way you pay your municipal rates, your electricity accounts, and all kinds of components of financial management, but also behavior. Not just financial management, but also behavior. Absolutely. That speak to the extent to which you should be getting credit. Become increasingly real into the future if you want to grow something typically. And I'm not talking about credit for the sake of just frivolously buying something that isn't going to add value. I'm talking about credit, which is necessary for you to develop your business. The Reserve Bank has created opportunities for banks to be putting much more money into our economic development opportunities. There are some lovely spin-offs of COVID-19, which include some freeing up of cash into business opportunities.
Absolutely.
It's been positioned with the financial services sector. That sector is going to be looking for investment opportunities. And we need to understand smartly now what qualifies us for that as small businesses, what qualifies us for that, and what are the factors and what are the big data analytics that speak to why we would be successful businesses if we were given access to affordable funding for the development of our businesses.
Absolutely. Thank you for zooming in on that. I want to quickly touch on funding opportunities or models and what the SME sectors are looking for lifeline at this point. So I want to quickly zoom in on that. But what is your advice to SME owners looking to close shop because the pressure has just been too great? What is your advice to them?
Colin, I had my own journey with SMMEs, and in a funny kind of way, there are still business opportunities that I link into on a personal basis. And I mean, I've just had a bit of a journey of my own. I want to say to people, sometimes when something is going to die, you have to be brave enough to pull the trigger and let it die quicker, rather than allowing it to drag around and drag you around. Now, I know from personal business experience that sometimes the cost of that is financial to you, and I've been there. It's always emotional to you. It feels at the time like you are falling off the edge of a cliff, or you're deliberately walking into a brick wall. Sometimes that's what it feels like. Now, there are times, unfortunately, when we've got to listen to the wisdom around us and the quiet, wise voice inside of us, and allow certain things, for the sake of emotion. Sometimes things just have to be let go, finish and clap. The truly creative cast aside what are just burdens on themselves. They leave it behind, and they start from scratch, and they start anew, and it's incredibly difficult. I wish I mean, there are stories which I will tell people one on one of how I have had to get to ground zero, work with nothing, knowing that I have no more than the money to literally just feed my family for this month, and go and find a new opportunity. I've increasingly been fortunate in being able to diversify where I make money and how I make money, including the opportunity of looking after some of the retailers' interests in the way I do now, which, by the way, is not something I do full time. It's about diversification, and it's about working in and recognizing that the very skills that you want to focus everything on can sometimes be used far more creatively in more sectors than you would even begin to imagine. So if something is done, genuinely, seriously done at this point,
Mr. Lawrence, but quickly funding, and I know there's multiple opportunities and options for funding, but I also know a lot of the SME owners and leaders are very weary, or they're very skeptical when it comes to taking funding at this point, because again, these guys are having to rethink their business, they're having to restructure. Do you advise that they look into funding or these funding opportunities at this point?
So if the funding is because you can see a clear line of surviving and growing opportunity for your business, for the business, if you can see if there is clarity of thought and clarity of structure,
100%,
I'm making my business survive, and I'm bringing the correct process along to leverage an opportunity into the future, in a future that people do see as being viable, then you look for that funding and you look for that opportunity. I've challenged a few business people over the last 2 months in particular, who I know are looking for no more than paying their bond off and their car off and their
surviving.
Now when your game is about yourself, when your game is about yourself, be honest enough to say that's what the game is. Don't go and ask for business funding when all you're really doing is trying to make yourself survive. And I tell people free of charge and for nothing that I have not in the last 10 years ever financed a car to buy a car. I think it's the most ridiculous thing. And so you finance things that you are going to get value from, and that you can see clear capital appreciation for and a value return from, in a sensible business way. If you're doing it because you want to be seen to be wonderful and fancy, well then you're going to pay the price at some point for that. That's a risk you're taking. So there is going to be money available. There is already money available. Partly for survival funding. The fact that it's complicated to access is appropriate. It can't just be on a handout. Somebody says give me and they get. It can't just be on that basis. So it does need to have some elements of structure.
Of course.
And our funding agencies need to be responsible about that. Business itself, the larger, more cash flush businesses will look for opportunities to support critical elements of their value chain. They will identify critical elements of their value chain.
Absolutely.
To support. It will come at a price. Everything does. For both parties, the lender and the borrower will have some pain around that. But you cannot be proud about funding, and you can't also be silly about funding. Again, as I said, sometimes if you're if you just got too much stuff in your life that you pay for on a monthly basis, get rid of some of the stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's good.
Absolutely great advice, Mr. Lawrence. But quickly, access to big data, access to this information and analytics that we spoke about earlier. Where should these guys, or where do these SME owners go to get you? And I think we're going to be very just uncensored in saying this. You need enough information. And you need enough access to resource and information at this point to migrate or transition out of this phase or this season into the next and into the future of fashion. So where can these guys or these owners of SME businesses go to access some of this big data and information that they need at this point, which will assist them in making informed decisions?
Look, I mean, this is as old as humanity itself. The question here is, we started out with this, Colin.
Yeah.
Who are you in a network linkage with?
I love that.
And a network linkage is not just about, I sit with you and I take advantage of you. It's something you must be adding value. You must be paying for the service, for the opportunity. I mean, I've not had as many applications from smaller retailers to join my federation. In the entire existence.
Are you there? I lost you for a sec.
I've had over the last 2 leveraging off. You can't wait for the crisis for that to happen.
Yeah.
You must be smart about your partnerships.
Yeah.
And you pay forward for exactly that. And again, I say for most people who are listening to this, be an active, participating, contributing member of the Cape Town Fashion Council. Get used to that first. Find your own easy spaces to engage with and develop those network spaces more and more. Look, if the cost of belonging is a lot cheaper if everyone belongs. You know, it's economies of scale are not difficult to understand like that.
Absolutely. One of the best pieces of advice I've received or heard in a very long time, Mr. Lawrence. But quickly to wrap this up, the future of fashion business in South Africa. What are your predictions?
So I was teasing with you at the beginning of this before we came online about the fact that I'm in a white t-shirt and you're looking all smart there. And I deliberately stayed in a white t-shirt because it's a public holiday. Those people who know me well will know I love the fact of being able to be eclectic in the way I dress. I choose to, and I'm not unique like that. We all think about how we're going to dress. So the fact of fashion is never going to go away. Even if we have more and more people working from home, even if we have more and more people working on a remote basis or on a web basis, the fact of fashion is with us forever. The numbers are there. COVID-19 is a health issue, but it's not going to